He once stood in front of millions, a man with a calm voice, sharp eyes, and an answer for everything. People called him a savior, a genius, a father figure for a generation that had none. But one day, everything he had built was on the line. Not his reputation, not his fame, his right to call himself a psychologist at all. The very system that trained him was now coming for him. And the charge, something that shocked even the people who hated him most. They said he was dangerous, unfit, a man who had gone too far. And for the first time in years, Jordan Peterson had nothing to say. His supporters flooded the internet. His enemies popped champagne. And the rest of the world sat back and watched, wondering the same thing: had the man who saved millions of people finally destroyed himself? But here's what nobody told you. What happened behind closed doors during that battle was darker, messier, and far more human than anything you saw in the headlines. This is the real story. To understand how Jordan Peterson ended up here, you have to go back to where he started, not the podcasts, not the book deals, not the sold-out arenas. Go back to a small frozen town in Alberta, Canada, a quiet, bookish kid who didn't quite fit anywhere. While other boys were outside, Peterson was buried in books: Dostoevsky, Jung, Nietzsche, Solzhenitsyn. He wasn't just reading them for fun. He was trying to understand something. Why do people suffer? Why do societies collapse? Is there any way out? That obsession followed him through university, through graduate school, all the way to Harvard, and eventually to the University of Toronto, where he became a professor of psychology. For years he was respected, admired by colleagues, but nobody outside of academia knew his name. Then 2016 happened. The Canadian government proposed a law that would require people to use preferred pronouns or face legal consequences. And Peterson said no. He filmed himself saying it. He put it on YouTube. The internet caught fire. Half the world called him a hero, the other half called him a monster. But something nobody expected happened in the middle of all that noise. Millions of people started listening. Not just about pronouns, about life, about suffering. About how to get yourself together when everything feels like it's falling apart. Young men especially, millions of them. Lost, angry, looking for something, and Peterson gave them something to hold on to. His old university lectures started getting millions of views overnight. His 2018 book, 12 Rules for Life, became one of the fastest-selling nonfiction books in history. He went from classroom to coliseum, from professor to phenomenon. He seemed untouchable. But no one stays untouchable forever. By 2019, Jordan Peterson was at the absolute top of the world tour, massive audiences, publishers fighting for his next book, millions of dollars. Millions of followers, his face on magazine covers, his voice in earbuds across every continent. And then the first crack appeared. His wife Tammy, the woman who had been by his side through everything, was diagnosed with a rare and aggressive form of kidney cancer. The prognosis was bad. And Peterson, the man who had spent his entire career teaching people how to carry their suffering, now had to carry his own. And it was heavier than anything he had prepared for. He started taking a benzodiazepine, a prescription medication for anxiety. Doctors approved it. It seemed like a reasonable response to an unbearable situation. But what happened next, no one saw coming. Instead of stabilizing him, the medication began to take over. He became physically dependent on it in a way that terrified even his doctors. And when he tried to stop, his body fought back with everything it had. The withdrawal was severe enough to become a medical emergency. In the middle of 2020, in the middle of a global pandemic, Jordan Peterson flew to Russia to undergo a medically induced coma. A treatment so extreme, so controversial that most doctors wouldn't even consider it. He nearly didn't survive. His daughter Michaela stayed by his side through the worst of it. She later shared fragments of what those weeks looked like. The fear, the uncertainty, the moments when they didn't know if he would come back, but he did come back. Only he wasn't quite the same man anymore. Peterson returned to public life in 2021, and his supporters welcomed him with open arms. But something had changed. His social media posts started to feel different. Sharper, more raw, more personal. He called a plus-size model not beautiful on Twitter. He made controversial comments about climate policy that ignited backlash from every direction. He wept openly in interviews, which some people read as honesty and others read as something more worrying. His critics, who had always been there, got louder. And then came the moment that changed everything. The College of Psychologists of Ontario, the professional body that held his license, announced they were investigating him. Not for anything he did with patients, not for anything clinical, for his tweets. They said his social media posts had caused harm, that they were demeaning, that they violated professional standards of conduct, and their solution, mandatory sensitivity training, social media coaching. Essentially, they wanted him to sit in a room and be taught how to speak. Peterson exploded. He called it compelled speech, government-backed censorship. An ideological attack disguised as professional discipline. The story went global within hours. Tucker Carlson, Elon Musk, commentators from every corner of the political world jumped in. But underneath all of that noise was a man who was quietly unraveling in ways the cameras weren't capturing. For Jordan Peterson, this was never just about a license. This was about everything he believed in. His entire career, every lecture, every book, every interview was built on one idea: speak the truth even when it costs you, even when it's dangerous, even when the institutions around you demand your silence. And now an institution was demanding exactly that. He appealed. His lawyers argued that regulating the personal speech of a private citizen, even a licensed professional, was a dangerous line to cross. That what a psychologist posts on Twitter has nothing to do with how they treat patients. The case moved through hearings, the arguments got sharper, the stakes got higher. And then one of the most telling moments of the entire saga happened. In an interview during the legal battle, Peterson stopped mid-thought. He paused longer than usual. And he admitted something that no one expected to hear from him. He said some of what he had posted had been written in anger, that he hadn't always been at his best, that the last few years had taken something from him that he wasn't sure he had gotten back yet. It was quiet, it was honest, and it was heartbreaking. Because here was the man who had told millions of people to take responsibility, to speak carefully, to be conscious of the weight of their words, admitting that he had lost control of his own. But the story wasn't done yet, not even close. The legal fight dragged into 2024, and then Peterson lost. The Ontario court ruled that the college did have the authority to require the training. It wasn't just a warning, it was a legal order: comply or lose your license. The world waited to see what he would do, and Peterson did something that stunned everyone: he refused. He announced publicly that he would no longer practice clinical psychology in Ontario. He was walking away from his license, not surrendering it, walking away from it, on his own terms. To the people who had followed him for years, it was the ultimate act of defiance. A man who had preached about standing firm, actually standing firm when it cost him something real. To his critics, it was the predictable end of a man who had always chosen his platform over everything else. But here's the part most people missed. Peterson hadn't seen patients in years. His license was largely symbolic at this point. His income, his influence, his entire world lived online. Giving up the credential didn't cost him the way people assumed it did. And yet something in the public conversation shifted. Even some of his most loyal supporters started asking quiet questions they hadn't asked before. Was he really okay? Was the anger in his posts something deeper than ideology? Had the weight of the last 5 years, the illness, the near-death, the battles, finally done something to him that couldn't be undone? The questions hung in the air, and then something new began. Today, Jordan Peterson is still here, still podcasting, still writing, still speaking to audiences that fill arenas. His wife Tammy survived her cancer. Peterson has spoken about that with a kind of emotion that cuts through every argument, every controversy, every headline: raw, unguarded love for a woman he almost lost. He has acknowledged the dark years. He hasn't pretended they didn't happen. And he hasn't stopped being who he is, which, depending on where you stand, is either the most admirable thing about him or the most troubling. But what his story leaves behind is something bigger than any debate about speech or licenses or tweets. It's the reminder that the people we put on pedestals are still people. That the man who teaches you how to carry pain can be broken by his own. That fame doesn't protect you. That principles held too rigidly can become their own kind of trap. And that the most complicated stories are always the ones where the hero and the cautionary tale are wearing the same face. Jordan Peterson's story isn't finished, not by a long way. So I want to know what you think. Was Peterson right to walk away from his license rather than submit to the training? Or did a man with his influence and his platform cross lines that can't just be explained away? Leave your thoughts in the comments. This is exactly the kind of story that deserves a real conversation. And if you want more stories like this, the ones that go past the headlines and into the truth, subscribe. We don't do surface level here, we never have.